Well, welcome everyone to today's alum Zoom conversation. This is part of a Careers Beyond Academia series sponsored by the Graduate School and the Office of Postdoctoral Services. We're really glad to see you here today. My name is Melissa Bostrom, and I am the Assistant Dean for Graduate Student Professional Development in the Graduate School, and I am delighted to introduce our featured guest today, Eric Juarez. He is a Presidential Management Fellow in the Education Branch at the Office of Policy, Communications, and Education at the National Center for Advancing Translational Sciences. That title just rolls right off my tongue, so I hope it does for you as well, Eric. Eric received his bachelor's degree magna cum laude in psychology from Harvard University and came to Duke for his PhD in psychology and neuroscience, graduating in 2022. His research integrated neuroscience, behavioral economics, and cognitive psychology to study the strategies that people use to make different kinds of choices. While he was a graduate student, he participated in interdisciplinary research through Basque Connections, and he completed the certificate in college teaching. Eric received the Forever Duke Student Leadership Award and the Duke Cornerstone Award in recognition of his service to the Duke community. After his graduation in 2022, he took a position as a Consortium for Faculty Diversity Fellow and visiting lecturer at Mount Holyoke College before moving to his current role, where he's a Presidential Management Fellow. In this role, he develops translational science education, training resources, and evaluations for intramural and extramural communities. In his brief time since graduation, he's already managed to build a career that spans academia and public service. So we're so delighted to welcome Eric back to Duke virtually to share his experiences today.
Thanks, Melissa, for that wonderful introduction.
You're very welcome, very welcome. So we have 5 key questions that we ask all our guests in this series. And I know there were also some questions that came in through the registration, so I'll turn to those next. But at any time while we're chatting, feel free to drop your questions in the chat. And there will also be some time at the end for folks to come off mute and jump in with their questions. So without further ado, let's get started. Eric, tell us about your background.
Sure. So your bio covered a lot of it, but so I came in to Duke with a bachelor's in psychology, and I also studied film pretty heavily in my undergraduate experience. And it was actually during my undergraduate time that I started to develop this interest in leadership and service. So while I was there, I was a summer residential advisor for high school students who were doing a summer program at Harvard. And by the kind of my last summer, I was a training leader and kind of low-level supervisor. And after that, and I also was involved in some committee work and kind of doing some curriculum work there in the Harvard Psychology Department. When I came to Duke, I was in the Psychology and Neuroscience Department, but what really attracted me to Duke is the very wide array of interdisciplinary work that is possible. So I was really excited to work. I ended up working on 2 different Basque Connections teams during my time at Duke. And I also served several committees with the Duke Board of Trustees. I also did an internship with the Office of Interdisciplinary Studies, doing evaluation work on our experiential education offerings for graduate students. And then I also did a reimagining doctoral education internship with my department, doing a curriculum evaluating our curriculum and proposing some updates that I'm very happy to announce. I don't know if there are any psychology and neuroscience people here, but they were implemented after I left. So that was very exciting to see that work go into effect. And then as Melissa mentioned, I spent the past year teaching, and that work really ties into what I'm doing now in an education branch, where a lot of what I'm doing is thinking about best practices in learning science and how to offer educational materials to a broad audience. So it's a lot of what we do is targeted to our trainees who have, some science background, some have quite a bit of scientific background, and some have less. We're the Center for Advancing Translational Sciences, so we work with transdisciplinary teams that are working to get things from bench to bedside. And so we work with people who are chemists and biologists and clinical scientists, all working together on informatics, bioinformatics folks, all working together on teams. So when we're preparing these training materials, it's important that they are beneficial to a wide audience, right? These are all scientists who are trainees, but their backgrounds are different from each other. And so they need to learn different skills to work more efficiently together.
Fascinating. So, Eric, tell us a little bit more about the Presidential Management Fellowship. How did you get this job, if you will, this fellowship?
Sure. Yeah. So there is a open application to anyone getting a graduate degree within 2 years of getting your degree, and it can be in almost every field you can imagine: master's, PhD, JD, various advanced degrees, MDs even. And there's an open call. It's going on right now. The deadline is on the 25th, I believe. And so that's how I got this job. I applied. When I did it, they've changed the process a little bit, but when I did it, there was just an online component, and it was a test that you'd fill out. It had kind of situational questions, like how would you react to different work scenarios, or more like personality kind of questions. And then you'd fill this out, put your resume in there, and send it off, and then you wouldn't hear anything for 4 to 6 months, and you just wait, or maybe it wasn't 4, it was like 3-ish months. You wouldn't hear anything, you wouldn't know what was happening, and in fact that's what happened in my case. I was waiting for that to come through, had this amazing opportunity to take a teaching position, and so I took that and did that for a year, and then I heard back from the program. The way the PMF program is structured, that's essentially the first step. You fill out the application. 10,000 people apply every year. Much smaller percentage become finalists, but finalists just means that you get access to a special jobs board, essentially. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but that's essentially what it is. So they post a bunch of jobs, and you apply to them like you would apply to any job. It's actually a little bit easier because your resume is already in the system, and you can just click a button and send, your interest to various organizations. That is essentially what I did. NIH had an open call. I clicked, apply. NIH was a little bit, had a more extensive process where there was also a kind of a hidden USA Jobs posting where I had to put up, kind of fill out some information for that profile. And then I didn't hear back for a long time. And it was December of this past year, got a contact from my now supervisor asking me if I was interested in the position that I now have, gave a little bit of a background. We did an interview. It seemed awesome. I'm omitting some things that made it more complicated, but eventually I am here and very happy with what I do. Started in July after I wrapped up my teaching position.
Eric, I feel so lucky that you have this expertise in teaching and training to be able to share your path with us. So I know there were a couple of questions that came in through the registration. Like, how did you even hear about the PMF? Where did you look to find out about this?
Yeah, so I first learned about this relatively early in my program because another person in the lab that I did my PhD in, Vijeth Iyengar, who is now Global Director of Aging at AARP, but he had done the PMF program and we didn't overlap, but he had left for PMF essentially right before I started. So I knew that this was a thing that people from my lab did and that it was a really cool opportunity. I ended up having an informational interview with him before I applied to learn more. And then also I had one of my best friends from college also received a PMF so yeah, I knew about it from a few different angles. So I knew that it was something that was a possibility for me leaving a PhD program to go and enter public service through this pathway, get a lot of leadership development experience, work on exciting projects, and really, since I was doing a lot of evaluation work already with my department and with the Office of Interdisciplinary Studies, that it really seemed like a nice translation of skills I'd developed at Duke.
Terrific. Thank you. I think we might come back to to dive more deeply into some of these questions in a minute. But first, give us a sense of what your day-to-day work life is like.
Yeah, so I started 8 weeks ago, and every day is a little bit different. Being a PMF, there are some really exciting kind of special benefits to the program. So something that was told to me is that 80% of your job is doing your daily job. For me, that's being a health specialist in the education branch, and 20% is PMF activities. NIH is has a very structured way of training and supporting its PMFs. They've been involved with the program since the 80s. The program started in the late 70s. NIH started working with the program a little bit after that, but they manage this program as part of the same cohort as one of their internal development programs. They call it the Management Intern Program, which has existed since the 50s. So there's just a lot of infrastructure at NIH. So 20% of what I do every week is activities related to that. So one of the things that we do is lead some management seminars for the entire organization. We doing informational interviews as part of that time. So there's protected time for me to talk to pretty much anyone in government I want to, which is a really great opportunity. And then kind of what am I doing in a typical day for my role? Similarly, it is lots of meetings, but I have a really fun role in that a lot of what I'm doing is similar to what I was doing as kind of a visiting faculty member and as a grad student. So I'm reading academic papers. I am designing evaluation instruments. I am designing evaluation studies. I am submitting IRB proposals. And I'm meeting with different working groups. I'm meeting with my team, and very soon, again, once IRB approvals get approved, then I'll be doing interviews for projects. And so like that's a lot of what I'm doing. You know, there are some days will be different where there will be something that comes up, and I'll have to do that. But a lot of my role is kind of as a researcher and bringing a research-minded approach to my role. I'm in a pretty unique position in the branch that I'm in, where at a lot of institutes across NIH, there are 27 institutes and centers across NIH, and the Center for Advancing Translational Sciences is just one of them. But a lot of what we do in our office or in our branch is like a training office. So working with postdocs, postbacks, grad students who are doing research here in our labs. And so a lot of the people on my team are hosting IDP sessions and coordinating fellowships and leading workshops. And so far, I haven't really done any of that. A lot of what I'm doing is more externally facing. And so that's just something unique about the particular role that I'm in, that I do more externally focused work and also a little bit more scholarship than most people in a training office might do. That said, NIH has a lot of people who do scholarship, and scholarship is more of a thing that happens here than PMFs at other agencies, where they might not be doing as much scholarly research as opposed to putting out white papers and reports. We do that too, but NIH has a little bit more of a, you know, we are a research agency. We do a little bit more research.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So for the postdocs and grad students who are on the call with us this afternoon, what would you recommend to folks who want to learn more about working in this field? What could they be doing now to prepare?
Yeah, so a lot of what, you know, in the role that I'm in is getting evaluation skills, whether that's through opportunities that I had at Duke, which was through the I don't know if the RIDE internship still exists, but that was an amazing opportunity when I had that. I know that I think there still are internship opportunities with the Office of Interdisciplinary Studies, and those kind of special projects kinds of things that you can do are really valuable to point to. Like, I did this thing organizationally that you know, that here is what we did, here is an output that was created, whether that's a report, an actual activity. But honestly, a lot of what I use in my everyday job is stuff that you do as grad students and as postdocs. Research skills, and like if you have R and Python, that's like amazing. A lot of people really, it's Excel, Word, PowerPoint. If you can master Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, like that's what everyone's like, wow, that's amazing. And so if you have R and Python, that's really even more like great and amazing. In what I do, like NVivo is probably helpful if you want to work in the kind of qualitative evaluation space. But I think one of the most valuable skills is actually how to write a resume, and how to really showcase what you do as a grad student and as a postdoc. Like what you are doing is, it is a job, like it is work. You are creating new knowledge, you are working on really large projects, and that is the kind of transferable skill that, the ability to do research is a skill that can apply so widely. So yeah, I'd say learning how to communicate that experience is a really important preparation.
Wonderful. Thank you. So, Eric, what is the employment outlook for this line of work, would you say? And recognizing that there are lots of variables happening in the current context.
Yeah, so the employment outlook, there's like micro scale and macro scale. So the types of jobs that PMFs do across government, so not just at NIH, but across government, are there's always openings. The challenge is kind of structuring a resume that that you're a good fit for the role. There is quite a bit of competition sometimes for these roles. And there are, different conditions that change the scope of hiring. So a couple of years ago, there was a huge hiring push, and that has slowed down a little bit. So there's less hiring now, although there's still plenty. The other thing to acknowledge is that the hiring process is just a lot slower in federal service. One of the nice things about the PMF is that it is on a bit of a compressed timeline. So, that it doesn't take as long as it could. But as with probably a number of industries, the federal sector has a pretty large population that will be approaching retirement in the next few years. And so there are certainly opportunities for younger folks to get into the federal service. And once you're here, there are opportunities to move around and to advance with a lot of these, again, retirements, other transitions that are happening.
Yes, that is a great reminder. In fact, there was a conference at Duke several years ago, pre-pandemic, raising these kinds of concerns about the massive number of retirements that are expected in the federal government and the opportunities for younger workers to come and be employed in that sector. So that's a great point to highlight. Excellent.
Yep.
So we have addressed all the questions that are on our standard list, and I've tried to kind of integrate a few from the registration as we went along too. But I want to recognize the folks who are joining us right now and see if y'all might have any questions you want to either share live or in the chat if you feel more comfortable. Renata?
Yeah, I'll hop in real quick. Thank you, Eric, for hopping on. Wow, I'm so sorry. I don't know why my camera did that. Thank you for hopping on. It's great to have your experience on the call. I'm curious, you alluded to this a little bit. The timeline for this, even though compressed, I mean, it's the federal government, it takes forever. So how do you navigate like trying to apply to jobs and being gainfully employed while waiting on this? And is there some accommodation and a flexibility on their end, acknowledging the timelines that way, or how did that go?
Yeah, so I don't know how it works for everyone. I will say that almost everyone that I know, unless so there are also people who have, they're coming out of a combined bachelor's master's program. And so for them, having a little bit of a break is totally fine for them. They kind of need that. Most people that I know did have some sort of employment, whether it's like a short-term contract job or working for a company for an amount of time or doing a postdoc for some amount of time. And that's ultimately what happened with me. Was I got the job offer in December, and I was pretty explicit, I have to finish out the academic year. And they were very considerate and accommodating of that. And, you know, there were certain things that we had to, you know, time out in terms of like what my start date actually was, so that it fit like requirements. But yeah, they're pretty, and this is, so that's for the PMF program. Broadly in federal government, that is a normal thing that gets encountered, is that people will have a job, and if you require a security clearance, I have what is called a public trust, which is, I think, the lowest level of clearance. But there are people who have like top secret clearance, which can take a very long time to get. And so there is an expectation that people will probably have another job that, and you can usually, there are two levels of offers that you get. You get something called a tentative offer and a final offer. And usually at that tentative offer time, you get to, you know, suggest when a start date would be mutually acceptable. And so that's something that can be negotiable at that time. Thanks for the question, Renato.
Kirby?
Yes, hello, I'm Kirby. I'm a first year in PNN also, so second year. Yeah, so I guess I wanted to ask about your experience with just like deciding that you wanted to pursue this career path versus like academia or even an industry and such, and kind of like when you kind of made that decision and how you got to there.
Great question, because I don't know if I've actually done that. I think one of the fun things about, like, especially once you start moving out of grad school, out of like the degree space, the opportunity to have kind of this unbounded or boundless career is, or boundaryless career, I think is the language, really becomes more apparent. And obviously academia is a little bit tougher because there are kind of certain progressions that are expected. But as I've been here, I've realized that even that is like, there are people who move back and forth between federal and academic sectors. There are people who move between industry and academic sectors. There are people who move between federal and industry sectors with some cool off time periods in between. But I am early enough in my career that I feel like I have sampled a bunch of different things and I really enjoy them all. And I see myself kind of really, I don't have, you know, I will see where opportunities take me. And I think that that's something I learned at Duke, especially, is when cool opportunities come up, take them and learn from them, and realize that you are the only person who can actually close doors. I mean, you can apply to something and they say no, but you control that first step. And, you know, developing relationships, certainly in federal and industry, and in academia, it's the same thing. Just, you know, keep in touch with people, let them know what you're doing. And so that's something I've kept in mind. But to get back to where you started the question, it was pretty early in my grad school time that I realized that I did want to do something that maybe was a little bit non-traditional in terms of having more of a wider systems view. And it was essentially, I think, probably the first Board of Trustees committee I attended. I was like, I really like thinking about how a university functions from this really high level. And there are there are jobs where you can start out at that really high level. And, you know, I'm in a role right now where I am thinking about translational science education at, like, you know, the systems level.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thanks for the question, Kirby.
Well, Eric, I feel like we could talk to you all day, but I know that you probably have 3 or 4 more meetings to attend because that is probably a life in federal government. Thank you so much for your generosity with your perspective and experiences and your inspiring advice to remember that, you know, you are the only person who can close doors for yourself. I think I'm going to take that away from today. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and please join me in a round of virtual applause for Dr. Eric Juarez. Thanks, everybody. Take good care.